The blue-white glow of the gravitational anomaly pulsed against the viewport as Captain Sunwoo leaned forward in her command chair. The UES Horizon, humanity's crown jewel of exploration technology, hovered at the edge of charted space, where the stars grew thin and the darkness between them stretched vast and unknown. "Readings are off the charts, Captain," said Officer Taeyong, his fingers dancing across holographic controls. "Nothing like this in our databases, or in the Galactic Council archives either," added Science Officer Mina, her eyes reflecting the swirling light. "This could be the discovery that finally earns humans some respect out here." Captain Sunwoo nodded, her expression serious, but eyes bright with curiosity. 10 years into humanity's acceptance into the greater galactic community, and still they were treated like children who had accidentally wandered into the adults' room. Advanced species like the crystalline luminar and the hive-minded Krell had been traveling between stars when humans were still figuring out basic agriculture. "Take us closer, Helmsman Jin." Quarter impulse. The massive ship, nearly a kilometer long with its distinctive triple-hull design, edged forward. Its silver-blue hull reflected the anomaly's light, making it seem as though the vessel itself was glowing. "Captain, energy readings are spiking," warned Security Chief Hyun. "Maybe, and we should hold position until—" A flash of light flooded the bridge. The anomaly no longer merely pulsed. It expanded, stretching like some great cosmic maw opening to swallow them. "Reverse thrusters!" Sunwoo shouted, but it was too late. The horizon shuddered, as if caught in the grip of some invisible giant. Warning klaxons screamed throughout the ship as the gravitational forces intensified. Crew members clutched at consoles, while others were thrown across the deck. "Hull integrity failing on decks 7 through 12, called Engineer Do-Yun through the comms. "Captain, we can't break free." The last thing Sunwoo saw before the blinding light consumed the bridge was the fear on her crew's faces. 320 souls under her command, venturing into the unknown. And then the UES Horizon vanished. Back on Earth, the disappearance sent shockwaves. Through the United Earth government, the Horizon had been their most advanced vessel, equipped with technology that represented decades of human innovation, combined with what little the Galactic Council species had been willing to share. "We extend our deepest condolences for this tragic loss," said Council Representative Zilith, an ancient luminar whose crystalline body contained memories spanning millennia. The formal statement was broadcast across every human colony and settlement. "Space exploration carries inherent risks that even the most advanced civilizations cannot eliminate." What the representative didn't say, what was discussed in private council chambers, was that many influential members considered the loss of the Horizon a fortunate development. Humans were unpredictable, their advancement too rapid, their curiosity untempered by the caution that comes with evolutionary maturity. Better to lose one ship now than face whatever chaos humans might unleash if they gained too much power too quickly. Life in the galaxy continued. Humans mourned their lost explorers and then, resilient as always, began planning new missions. The Galactic Council returned to addressing what they considered truly important matters: trade agreements between ancient civilizations, philosophical debates that had been ongoing for thousands of years, and the careful management of technological advancement among younger species, until the first reports came from the Antares sector. The mining colony on Antares 4 went silent without warning. When investigation ships arrived, they found nothing. Not destruction, not abandonment, but nothing. The entire planet appeared to have been consumed. Where a thriving world had been, only a spherical void remained, a perfect absence of matter that defied explanation. Similar reports followed from the Cygnus Reach, then the Orion Spur, then a dozen other locations along the galaxy's outer rim. The Galactic Council's greatest scientific minds were baffled. Their most advanced sensor arrays detected something moving through space. Not a fleet, not a weapon in any conventional sense, but a phenomenon they called the Void. It left perfect emptiness where star systems had once existed, advancing inexorably inward toward the galaxy's more populated regions. The elder species deployed their most advanced defensive technologies: gravity manipulators, space-time distortion, fields, Dimensional barriers developed over thousands of years of peaceful progress. Nothing worked. The void consumed everything it touched, unaffected by weapons or shields. For the first time in recent memory, panic spread among the ancient civilizations. Their perfect logic and sophisticated technologies offered no solution. The Krell hive mind calculated that the entire galaxy would be consumed within 30 years. The Luminar began transferring their consciousness records to seed ships bound for neighboring galaxies, and somewhere in the vastness of space, unknown to the panicking civilizations, the UES Horizon was about to return, transformed in ways that would redefine humanity's place in the galactic order. The ship that had vanished with 320 souls would come back with something the elder species had never truly understood: human determination, forged in the crucible of survival against impossible odds. A determination that would soon become the galaxy's last best hope against the encroaching darkness. Lieutenant Commander Kijun rubbed his tired eyes as he stared at the console. Another endless night shift monitoring deep space frequencies aboard Coalition Station Epsilon. Most nights passed with nothing but the occasional merchant vessel check-in or routine patrol report. Then his console pinged. At first, he thought he was dreaming. The signal was faint, barely distinguishable from background radiation, but its pattern was unmistakable. Emergency Channel 16A, a frequency reserved for one vessel, the long-lost UES Horizon. "Sir," Kijun called, his voice cracking. "You need to see this." Admiral Jiwoo abandoned her coffee and rushed to his station. Her eyes widened as she recognized the signal pattern. "Are you certain?" she whispered. "The encryption key matches, sir. It's them. It's the Horizon." Within hours, 3 Coalition cruisers were dispatched to the coordinates. The signal originated from a remote sector near the Perseus Arm, ironically not far from where the Horizon had vanished a decade earlier. Aboard the lead vessel, the UES Intrepid, Commander Hana peered through the viewscreen as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel. What they saw left the bridge crew speechless. It resembled the Horizon in basic shape only. The sleek exploration vessel humanity had been so proud of had transformed into something impossible. Its hull now stretched nearly 3 times its original length, covered with a metallic substance that seemed to shift colors as they watched. Structures jutted from its surface that followed no human design philosophy, geometric patterns that hurt the eyes if observed too long, sections that seemed to phase in and out of visible reality. "Life signs?" Hana asked, finding her voice. "Hundreds." "Commander," replied her sensor officer, "but the readings are unusual. They register as human, but with anomalies I can't explain." The Intrepid established a holding pattern at a safe distance, while hails were sent. For nearly an hour, there was no response. Then, without warning, a communication channel opened. "This is Captain Sunwoo of the UES Horizon," came a voice that sounded both familiar and strangely harmonized, as if multiple people were speaking in perfect unison. "Request permission to return to Coalition space. After extensive security protocols and verification procedures, a small delegation from the Intrepid was permitted to dock with the transformed vessel." Commander Hana led the team, her heart pounding as the airlock cycled and opened into the Horizon. The interior was as changed as the exterior. Corridors that had once been standard Coalition design now curved in ways that seemed to defy Euclidean geometry. Surfaces glowed with soft blue light from no apparent source. And then there were the crew. Captain Sunwoo greeted them in what had once been the main bridge, but now resembled a cathedral of technology. She looked recognizably human at first glance, but closer inspection revealed subtle differences. Metallic implants traced delicate patterns along her temples and jawline. Her eyes reflected light in a way that wasn't quite natural. "We understand you have questions," Sunwoo said with a slight smile. 10 years is a long time to be missing." What followed was a story that would change humanity's understanding of both the universe and themselves. The gravitational anomaly had been a gateway, not built, but grown by entities beyond human comprehension. The Horizon had been pulled through into what Sunwoo described as the space between spaces, where they encountered the void in its nascent form. "It's not a natural phenomenon," explained Chief Engineer Do Hyun, whose right arm had been replaced entirely with a limb of shifting metal and light. It's a weapon deployed by beings we came to call the architects. They seed these voids in galaxies they wish to harvest. The crew's tale unfolded like something from a fever dream. Their initial encounter with the void had nearly destroyed them. Only a desperate maneuver, diving into a time dilation field created by the gateway, had saved them. What was minutes for the galaxy was decades for us, Sun Wu continued. We were trapped in a bubble of stretched time, watching the void grow and consume system after system. We couldn't escape, but we could learn and adapt. They had encountered other survivors in the time bubble, remnants of civilizations from other galaxies that had already fallen to the void. Together, they had learned, shared knowledge, and slowly transformed both themselves and their ship. The cybernetic enhancements were necessary, explained Medical Officer Yunji, touching the metallic filaments visible beneath her skin. Our bodies needed to interface with the technologies we discovered. Our minds needed expansion to comprehend what we were learning. In the time bubble, generations of the original crew had lived and died. Knowledge had been preserved, passed down, expanded upon. The current crew, descendants of the originals in some cases, the originals themselves in others, had finally discovered a way to escape the time dilation field and return. But we couldn't come back empty-handed, Sun Wu said, her voice solemn. Not when we knew what was coming for our galaxy. She led the delegation to the heart of the transformed ship. There, suspended in a chamber of swirling energy, was a device unlike anything human science had conceived. An amalgamation of technologies from a dozen fallen civilizations, refined and rebuilt by generations of desperate human ingenuity. This is the nullifier, Sun Wu said simply. The only weapon ever built that successfully closed a void. And we've come home to mass-produce it before it's too late. As Commander Hana's team prepared to return to the Intrepid with their incredible news, she took one last look at the transformed humans who had returned from beyond the edge of known space. They were changed, yes, perhaps too much for some back home to accept, but in their eyes burned the same determination, the same quintessentially human spirit that had driven their species from caves to the stars. The horizon had returned, and with it, perhaps, the galaxy's only hope. The great chamber of the Galactic Council gleamed with polished surfaces of materials not found on Earth. Floating platforms arranged in concentric circles held representatives from 200 sentient species, many so alien that special environmental chambers had been constructed for them. At the center stood Captain Sun Wu and Commander Jihun, looking small and primitive compared to the ancient beings surrounding them. We thank our human colleagues for their dramatic presentation, said High Counselor Zeph of the Luminar, his crystalline body refracting light in hypnotic patterns. While the return of your lost vessel is certainly noteworthy, these claims about an existential threat to our galaxy are, frankly, alarmist. Sun Wu clenched her jaw, the subtle cybernetic implants along her temples pulsing with a faint blue light. For 3 days they had presented evidence, data, and first-hand accounts of the void to increasingly dismissive council members. Alarmist? Jihun stepped forward, his own cybernetic enhancements more pronounced than Sun Wu's. Where his right eye had once been, a multi-spectrum scanner now whirred softly as it analyzed the council chamber. 17 star systems have already been consumed. We've shown you the evidence. The Krell representative, a vaguely insectoid being who spoke for a hive mind of trillions, produced a sound like rustling leaves, their equivalent of a condescending laugh. Young species often mistake natural cosmic phenomena for threats, the Krell said. Our civilization has studied space-time anomalies for over 50,000 years. What you call the void is likely a temporary quantum fluctuation that will dissipate naturally. Sun Wu activated her wrist projector, displaying a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy above the chamber floor. Red dots appeared, showing the systems already lost. There's nothing natural about this pattern of consumption, she insisted. The void is targeting resource-rich systems first, then moving inward along efficient consumption vectors. That's not random. That's a harvesting strategy. From the upper tier of the chamber, a figure rose from the shadows. Unlike the other council members who relied on translation devices, Ambassador Teriel of the Clarens spoke in clear, accented human language. "I will hear more of this evidence," said Teriel, his four eyes blinking in sequence along a ridge where a human forehead would be. His scaled skin shifted from deep blue to a troubled purple. "The Claren Confederation has encountered extinction-level threats before." A murmur rippled through the chamber. The Clarens rarely participated in council debates, preferring to observe. Their civilization had nearly been wiped out millennia ago by what they called the Great Devouring, an event so traumatic that it shaped their entire culture. High Counselor Zeph's crystalline form flashed with irritation. "Ambassador Teriel, surely your people have evolved beyond giving credence to primitive fears." Teriel descended from his platform, moving with the fluid grace of his species as he approached the humans. "We have evolved by remembering our history, Counselor. When the devouring came for my ancestors, they too were dismissed by those who believed themselves too advanced for extinction." The council chamber erupted in argument as Teriel formally requested a private session with the human delegation. 2 hours later they returned. The Claren's color had shifted to a deep blood red, a sign of extreme agitation among his kind. "The council will view this evidence," Teriel announced, his voice cutting through the chamber's noise. "Not as a courtesy, but as an imperative." Commander Jihoon stepped forward, placing a data crystal of alien design into the central console. The lights in the chamber dimmed as a new projection appeared, not just star maps and consumption patterns, but something far more disturbing. "This is a quantum resonance scan of the Void's edge," Jihoon explained, as the image zoomed in to show what appeared to be microscopic machines breaking down matter at the subatomic level. "These are not natural formations. They're engineered nanites programmed to disassemble matter and convert it to energy." A second image appeared, a complex mathematical model that spiraled and shifted. Even the most advanced council species leaned forward, their attention fully captured. "And this," Sunwoo continued, "is the control signal we detected directing the Void's expansion. It originates from outside our galaxy entirely." Ambassador Teriel moved to stand beside the humans. "Our scientists have confirmed these findings. What the humans call the Void shares a 97% similarity signature with the ancient records of the Devouring. It is a weapon, deployed by entities who harvest galaxies." For the first time since the presentation began, silence fell across the chamber. The Luminar's crystalline body had dulled to an ashen grey. The Krell representative had gone utterly still. "If the consumption pattern continues at its current rate," Jihoon said into the silence, "the Void will reach the galactic core within 5 years. Nothing in its path will survive." A horrified murmur swept through the chamber as the implications sank in. The core contained the oldest, most developed systems, the heart of every major civilization in the galaxy. "Impossible," said a representative of the Volsin aggregate, a gaseous species that communicated through complex molecular exchanges. "Our defensive technologies are useless," Sunwoo interrupted. "We've analyzed your most advanced shielding systems, your space-time distortion fields, your dimensional barriers. The nanites comprising the Void simply adapt to and then consume any energy pattern they encounter. Your defenses become fuel." The council descended into chaos. Species that had been philosophical rivals for millennia now huddled together, their representatives whispering urgently. Others demanded immediate evacuation protocols for the core worlds. Still others fell into what appeared to be religious rituals, final rites for dying civilizations. In the midst of the panic, Teriel raised his voice again. "But the humans have not come merely with warnings. Tell them, Captain Sunwoo." Sunwoo stepped forward once more. Around her neck hung a small device, a miniature version of the nullifier from the horizon. "We have a solution," she said, her voice carrying across the now silent chamber. "Technology we developed during our time in the dilation field. With Claren assistance, we've refined it further. But building enough nullifiers to counter the Void will require resources beyond what Earth can provide. We need the Council's full cooperation." High Counselor Zeph floated down from his platform, his crystalline form still ashen. When he spoke, The ancient being's voice had lost all its previous condescension. "You came to us not merely as harbingers of doom, but as bearers of hope," he said slowly. "How is it that your species, barely a cosmic infant, has found what our combined civilizations could not?" Commander Jehoon smiled slightly, the scar tissue around his cybernetic eye crinkling. "Because sometimes survival depends not on being the most advanced, but on being the most adaptable. And humans have been adapting to survive against the odds since before we left our caves." Outside the council chamber's massive windows, the galactic arm spread in glittering splendor. Billions of stars hosting countless lives, all now facing an approaching darkness. But for the first time since the void had appeared, there was a flicker of something new in the face of that darkness. There was hope. The orbital shipyards above Claren Prime had never seen such frenzied activity. Where once elegant vessels were crafted over decades with meticulous precision, now a new kind of fleet took shape with desperate speed. At the center of the massive construction web hung the transformed UES Horizon, its impossible hull serving as both template and inspiration. Captain Sunwoo stood on the observation deck, watching as crews of a dozen different species swarmed over skeletal ship frames. Behind her, Commander Jehoon was engaged in what could only be described as an argument with 3 Luminar engineers, their crystalline bodies flashing with agitation. "You can't possibly expect us to modify the quantum stabilizers this way," the lead Luminar engineer protested. "It violates 4 fundamental laws of particle dynamics." "Those laws were written before we understood what we're facing," Jehoon countered, grabbing a holographic schematic and twisting it into a new configuration. "We need systems that can adapt on the fly, not perfect but predictable responses. What he's suggesting is madness," another Luminar said, turning to Sunwoo. "Captain, please explain to your subordinate that engineering requires precision, not this improvisation." Sunwoo smiled slightly. "That improvisation is exactly why we're all still here to have this argument. Show them, Jehoon." Jehoon nodded and activated his neural interface. The holographic display shifted, showing footage from the Horizon's first encounter with a tendril of the void. The ship's original shields had failed within seconds. Then came the improvised solution, cycling shield frequencies in a seemingly random pattern, guided not by algorithms but by human intuition and split-second decisions. "The void adapts to patterns," Sunwoo explained. "Its nanites analyze, predict, and overcome, but they struggle against true randomness, against choices that don't follow logical progression." The Luminar engineers fell silent, their crystalline forms dimming as they processed this information against millennia of engineering tradition. "What you're asking," the lead engineer finally said, "is for us to build imperfection into the systems deliberately. I'm asking you to build systems that can be guided by intuition rather than pure logic," Sunwoo corrected, "and to trust that sometimes the illogical choice is the only one that will work against an enemy that can predict and counter perfect logic." Across the shipyard, similar conversations were happening as species that had looked down on humans for generations now found themselves being taught by them. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. In the massive training chamber aboard the Claren station Bright Hope, Engineer Do-hyun stood before an unlikely class, 60 beings from 15 species, all selected for their potential adaptability. Their physiology ranged from vaguely humanoid to utterly alien, yet all shared one thing: they were considered unusual by their own kinds. "The neural interface isn't just technology," Do-hyun explained, the metallic components of his cybernetic arm shifting slightly as he held up a delicate headset. "It's a partnership. The ship doesn't simply obey commands. It anticipates, it suggests, it collaborates." A Krell drone, separated from its hive mind for the first time in its existence, raised an appendage. "But our thought processes are linear, sequential. We cannot achieve the thought chaos that humans naturally generate." Do-hyun laughed. "That's exactly what makes this interesting. We don't need you to think like humans. We need you to combine your natural strengths with new patterns." He turned to the simulation pods lining the chamber walls. "Today we're going to play a game." The game was unlike anything the alien trainees had experienced. The simulation pods dropped them into scenarios where logical solutions led to failure. Only by embracing intuitive leaps, emotional responses, and seemingly random choices could they succeed. Many struggled. Some excelled in ways that surprised even Do-hyun. A young Volsin whose gaseous form swirled with anxiety proved remarkably adept at the intuitive navigation challenges. A Luminar engineer who had been considered defective by her people for her emotional variability showed an extraordinary talent for weapons targeting that relied on gut feeling rather than calculated trajectories. On the command deck of the newly christened Defender-class vessel Unexpected, Captain Sunwoo addressed the first mixed-species crew. "What we're attempting has never been done before," she said, looking at the faces around her. Human, Claren, Luminar, Krell, Volsin, and others. "We're not just building a fleet, we're creating a new way of fighting, of thinking, Lieutenant." Minji, the ship's tactical officer, stepped forward. "Captain, the simulation results from the fleet exercises are ready." The holographic display showed dozens of ship markers, engaged with a simulated void tendril. Traditional combat formations had been abandoned. Instead, the ships moved in what appeared to be chaos, until one looked closer and saw the pattern. Within the apparent randomness, they were acting as a neural network, each vessel making decisions that seemed independent, but contributed to an emergent strategy no single mind could have devised. 73% success rate, Minji reported, up from 29% using conventional tactics. A murmur passed through the command crew. It wasn't perfect. Many ships still died in the simulation, but it was the first real hope they'd had. "We launch tomorrow," Sunwoo announced. "The Void has consumed the Arcturus sector and is advancing toward the Orion Spur. We'll intercept it at the Cygnus crossing." As the crew dispersed to make final preparations, Ambassador Terrell approached Sunwoo privately. "My ancestors' records spoke of something like this," the Claren said quietly. "Not the threat itself, but the response. They called it the joining of unlike minds. It was considered mythical, a fanciful solution that could never actually work." Sunwoo watched through the viewport as more ships took formation around them, each one built with technology from a dozen worlds, each crew a mixture of species that would never have worked together under normal circumstances. "Sometimes the myths contain more wisdom than the textbooks," she replied. "The universe doesn't care about our divisions or our hierarchies. It only cares if we survive." Terrell's scales shifted to a deep gold, a color of solemn commitment in Claren emotional language. "When this is over, nothing will be the same between our peoples." Sunwoo touched the neural interface at her temple, feeling the ship's systems responding to her thoughts, and she to its. Around her, human and alien crew members prepared for a battle that would determine the fate of the galaxy. "That," she said quietly, "is exactly what we're counting on." The battle for the galactic core unfolded across a canvas of stars and darkness. 300 ships of the Allied fleet formed a protective sphere around the ancient Sun cluster, birthplace of the oldest civilizations and home to trillions of lives. At the fleet's center, the transformed UES Horizon led the formation, its impossible hull gleaming with energy patterns never before seen in this galaxy. On the Horizon's bridge, Captain Sunwoo stood surrounded by holographic displays showing the Void's approach. It no longer resembled the amorphous darkness that had consumed outer systems. Now it had form, massive structures of impossible geometry, like cathedral ships built by beings who understood dimensions beyond the comprehension of most species. "They've finally shown themselves," Sunwoo said quietly. "The architects." 17 vessels, reported Lieutenant Minji from the tactical station, her cybernetic implants pulsing as she processed the incoming data, each one controlling a different section of the Void nanite swarm. Commander Ji-hoon studied the enemy formation with his enhanced eye. "They're arranging in a consumption pattern we haven't seen before, more efficient than previous approaches." "They're adapting to us," Sunwoo realized. "They see our defense as just another optimization problem to solve." Engineer Do-hyun rushed onto the bridge, his movements urgent. For weeks he had been analyzing captured Void nanites, trying to understand the intelligence directing them. "Captain, I've found something," he said, connecting his cybernetic arm to the main display. Data streamed across the screens, complex patterns that made sense only to those with neural implants. "The architects, they're not what we thought." "Explain," Sun Wu ordered, as the enemy vessels began their approach. "They're not biological or even artificial intelligence as we understand it," Do-hyun continued. "They're perfect optimization. Engines, entities evolved or designed for absolute efficiency. Everything they do follows the most direct path to resource acquisition." "How does that help us?" Ji-hoon asked as warning signals flashed across tactical displays. The first wave of void nanites had begun their assault on the outer defense perimeter. Do-hyun's eyes lit with the intensity of discovery. "They can't understand choice that doesn't maximize gain. Every strategy they've used, every adaptation they've made, it's always the mathematically optimal solution. But they can't predict or counter choices that deliberately accept loss." Sun Wu understood immediately. Sacrifice. Across the communication network, the Allied fleet reported the outer defense line failing. The nanite swarms were adapting to their shield frequencies faster than the automated systems could adjust. Ships began to fall, their hulls dissolving into nothing as the void consumed them. "All ships, this is Captain Sun Wu," she broadcast to the fleet. "Implement Protocol Omega." Throughout the fleet, human crew members took direct neural control of their vessel's systems, overriding automated responses. The battle formation that had appeared organized suddenly dissolved into apparent chaos. Ships moved in unpredictable patterns, some seeming to retreat, others charging directly toward the void tendrils. On the horizon, Do-hyun activated the ship's primary weapon, the full-scale nullifier. Unlike conventional weapons that attacked with energy or matter, the nullifier generated a field of pure possibility. Quantum states that hadn't resolved, patterns that existed outside normal causality. "The nullifier can disrupt their control signals," Do-hyun explained. "But we need to get closer, inside their formation." "That's suicide," the Claren tactical officer objected. "The nanite concentration around the architect vessels would consume us in seconds." "Exactly," Sun Wu said with a grim smile. "They won't expect it because it's not optimal." The horizon broke from the defensive sphere, accelerating directly toward the center of the architect formation. Behind them, 50 volunteer ships followed, each piloted by crews who had embraced the human concept of necessary sacrifice. The architect vessels reacted instantly, redirecting nanite swarms to intercept the approaching threat. But the Allied ships didn't move to avoid them. Instead, they plunged directly into the densest concentrations, their shields cycling through randomized frequencies, guided not by algorithms, but by the intuitive choices of their neural-linked pilots. Ships were lost. Brave crews dissolved into nothing as their sacrifices bought precious seconds. But enough vessels pushed through, including the horizon, its hull partially dissolved but its nullifier intact. "We're in position," Ji-hoon reported, blood trickling from his nose as the neural interface strained his brain to its limits. "But the nullifier's power systems are damaged. We can't generate a field large enough to affect all 17 architect vessels." Sun Wu looked at her crew, human and alien alike, all bound together in this moment of desperation and hope. "Then we choose which ones to target." "The logical choice would be the lead vessels," the Luminar science officer suggested. "No," Sun Wu countered. "We target the ones at the formation edges, the least optimal choice, the ones they'll least expect us to prioritize." As the horizon and its surviving companions unleashed their nullifiers, the effect was immediate and stunning. The targeted architect vessels didn't explode or dissolve. They simply ceased to function, their perfect optimization engines unable to process the quantum uncertainty field surrounding them. What followed was not a conventional victory. The remaining architect vessels didn't retreat or surrender. But as their collective optimization network struggled to compensate for the loss of their companions, their attacks became predictable, following only the most obvious efficiency patterns. The Allied fleet, embracing the chaotic battle doctrine developed by humans, exploited every hesitation and predictable response. One by one, the remaining architect vessels were isolated and neutralized. The nanite swarms, without their controlling intelligence, began to break down. 3 days later, amid the debris of countless sacrificed ships, Captain Sun Wu stood before the Galactic Council once more. This time, there was no dismissal in their reception. Representatives of species that had considered humans barely worth acknowledging now bowed their heads in respect as she entered. "We have confirmed that the void has dissipated throughout all sectors," High Counselor Zeph announced, his crystalline form glowing with a humble blue light. "Though the cost was great, the galaxy endures." Sun Wu looked around the chamber at the diminished council. Many representatives were missing, their home systems consumed before the final victory. "The cost will always be remembered," she said quietly. Ambassador Teriel stepped forward. "The Council has reached a unanimous decision. Humanity will be elevated to elder status, with all rights and responsibilities thereof. Furthermore, we propose the establishment of a new galactic defense force with humans at its core." A murmur of approval swept through the chamber, something unprecedented in the often fractious council. "For millennia, we saw your species' unpredictability as a weakness," continued the High Counselor. "Your emotional decisions, your acceptance of inefficient choices, your willingness to sacrifice, these seemed like evolutionary flaws. Now we understand they were strengths we had forgotten in our pursuit of perfect logic and efficiency." Later, as Sun Wu stood on the observation deck of the damaged but triumphant Horizon, Engineer Doyun joined her, his cybernetic arm now more makeshift than elegant after emergency repairs. "What will we do now?" he asked, gazing out at the stars that still shone because of what they had accomplished. Sun Wu watched as repair ships from a dozen species worked together to rebuild what had been damaged, alien crews now eagerly adopting human methods and perspectives. "We'll do what humans have always done," she answered. "We'll explore, we'll build, we'll prepare." She turned to face him, her expression both weary and determined. "And if the void comes again, from this galaxy or any other, we'll be ready." In the vastness of space around them, the new Allied fleet began to take shape. No longer separate species with separate agendas, but a unified force with humanity's unconventional wisdom at its heart. The galaxy had faced its greatest threat and survived, transformed by the very species it had once dismissed. Not through perfect technology or ancient wisdom, but through the quintessentially human understanding that sometimes the path to victory requires the courage to choose sacrifice over certainty. The end.